Welcome to another scriptural study. In this scriptural study, we will explore the following question. Is truth secured with a subjective and/or an objective approach? Why is this so important? Isn't it true that asking the right questions is as important as answering them? So again, is truth secured with a subjective and/or an objective approach? Because isn't truth more easily secured on objective information that is determined to be factual over time, which is based on observations and measurements, which can be tested and proven? And isn't it more difficult to secure truth with subjective information, which originates from personal opinions, judgments, and/or feelings from an individual, and as well, possibly a group's point of view? As an example, what happens when journalists and the news outlets they work for become subjective rather than objective? Is it true then that the reporting of news with a subjective approach can have the risk of becoming fake news due to everyone's subjective opinions dictating what is released and how it must be worded? As an example, the Washington Post changed the headline of its obituary for Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the ISIS terror leader who was killed in a U.S. raid in Syria over the weekend. After receiving widespread subjective backlash behavior for referring to him as an austere religious scholar. Because the original headline from the Washington Post was posted online after President Trump announced al-Baghdadi's killing. Here was the original headline, but this original headline caused a public barrage of subjective opinionated fallout as well. And what resulted was the change from the Washington Post in saying he was a austere religious scholar, as we can see here. But after this second release, a further barrage of subjective public opinionated fallout forced another change, as the third headline from the Washington Post now reads, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, extremist leader of Islamic State, dies at 48. Yes, 3 separate headlines for the same news article, all presenting different views on what actually is the truth. Does this latest example then, from the news media, highlight the dangers of a subjective approach in reporting news stories, as world events are now being reported with the author's personal impression and/or view, based on what they think the public will like to see and/or hear? Is it any wonder then that news media outlets are being labeled as fake news? Here is an example to the point. A rebuttal article from this source put it this way: mainstream media mourns ISIS leader's death in what Isaiah meant by calling evil good. As the article quoted this passage from the prophet Yashayahu, known as Isaiah today, which states, those who call evil good and good evil, who present darkness as light and light as darkness, who present bitter as sweet and sweet as bitter. This author was basically sharing that the actions of the Washington Post, having to change the headlines for the same story up to 3 times, which was the result of subjectivity being allowed to seep in to this particular news agency. And as such, why he believed the Washington Post was ensnared subjectively in calling evil good and good evil, and as such presented darkness as light and light as darkness, thus presenting bitter as sweet and sweet as bitter. The author of this article went on to write the following, quote, "People don't want the truth. They want a show that sells. The internet works by channeling to people what they already want, the subjective reality they feel comfortable with. People are so bored that they have lost their way, and everything, even news, has become entertainment. People are fascinated by reality shows, but it can't be both reality and a show. Reality is not a show, and shows are not reality. That line, the difference between reality and show, has become lost. People think their life is a show, but it isn't. People are distant from their own lives and see life as a show." He goes on to write, "Part of the redemption, Torah and Yahuwah, is a return to objective reality. Truth is something you have to search for, the end result of a process. It is reconnecting your subjective reality with truth and objective reality. If you take Yahuwah out of the picture, you lose objective reality." He finalizes the article by sharing why the right-wing religious live in rural areas, where the natural aspect of the Creator is evident in everyday life. He goes on to say, in cities, it is quite easy to insulate yourself in a fabricated, subjective reality of your own choosing. You can sit in a city and argue that a boy is actually a girl, but when you go out and try to milk a bull, things get real very quickly. So, what do you make of all of this? Is subjectivity now usurping objectivity, and thus a possible reason why the news is increasingly being labeled as fake? And the bigger question is this: with the ever-increasing speed of advancements in technology, with the evolution of 5G technologies and quantum computing capabilities, will we get an improvement in communication that is objective, fact-based, if you will? And/or will we continue to experience increasing levels of subjective information that is fiction-orientated? One truly must ask, what are these World Wide Web platforms truly designed to communicate? Fact or fiction? It's only one of the many reasons we came off of Facebook 5 months ago. We were so tired of being slaves, let alone pawns, to this particular platform. And thankfully, many more are becoming aware of what this World Wide Web platform is ramping up to do in the future, along with the other World Wide Web tools being developed today. Can you say social credit system? And why eventually we will come off of YouTube as well. Just as the author stated from the article, which we have already shared, the internet works by channeling to people what they already want, the subjective reality they feel comfortable with. Yes, the truth is that we are all being challenged increasingly daily to be objective. let alone to discern and to determine what is true and what is not. Here is another great question. How long will the definition of absolute truth remain intact? Will this be the next thing removed from our vocabulary? Because those with a subjective approach in securing truth usually will ignore undisputable facts and many, many other things that have always been true based on empirical evidence that can be tested and proven. Is this why the Scripture states not to trust our own hearts? Because isn't it true that to admit this, we must then bury our human frailties that are based on pride, and thus recognize that truth can only be secured on a foundation of honesty and humility? And this is why then that feelings are not facts, and that our worst battle in life is what we know as compared to what we feel. Is this why the Apostle Shaul, known as Paul today, stated that the flesh lusts against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh? Is it any wonder so many today are attempting to obliterate the writings of this particular apostle? If indeed this topic is of further interest to you, then please take the time to view this next scriptural study video that we completed 2 years ago entitled The 7 Available Steps to Determine Absolute Truth. We continue to call upon the name that these scriptural study videos provide value to you and your loved ones. Until next time, all the best in the name which is above all names.